Welcome to Escapists Anonymous, the fantasy fiction book club. I'm Dan.
And I'm Sam.
And in this episode, we're tying off as many loose ends as possible as we wrap up our discussion of Elizabeth Lim's 6 Crimson Cranes. So hang on to the bowl on your head, tie down all of your cranes, and warn all of your friends, humans and dragons alike, that we're in for some serious spoilers as we head back to the Kingdom of Kiata one final time. All right, episode 12, and we're back, and we have finished 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. So, yeah, serious spoilers in this episode. We're going to be delving into how it all concluded and how we feel about all of that.
And how in some ways it didn't conclude. And whether that's a continuing bugbear for me.
Running theme of the entire podcast series. So, do you want to, Sam, give us a recap of the frantic course of events that took place over these last few chapters?
I sure do. And boy, oh boy, does a lot of stuff happen. Okay, so here's the recap. Shiori begins work on spinning the Starstroke threads in secret in Zyrina's room using Zyrina's spinning wheel. One night during her work, Kiki dips her wing in some gold dye on Zyrina's desk. She and Shiori comment on it, but then move on to other matters. After many nights, Shiori's completed the Starstroke net and stows it in her magical satchel. The morning after, Shiori is barred from the kitchen. Magari has fallen ill once more, and Zyrina is accusing Shiori of poisoning her with her monkey cakes. The day after, guards arrest Chiroan, the head chef, accusing him of being the one who killed Oriya with 4 breaths. Soon after, Shiori has another dream about Raikama, a memory from many years ago. Raikama is lightly reprimanding Shiori for taking one of her snakes and playing a practical joke on her brother Reiji. The two of them share a joke and a loving moment, and Raikama begins to glow. This causes Raikama to change her mood and become tetchy and withdrawn, and denies that she loves Shiori like a daughter. Kiki wakes Shiori up to tell her that Seiryu wants to have a meeting down by the river. Shiori sneaks out of the castle and down to meet Seiryu. Seiryu seems tense and tells her that the Dragon King still hasn't forgiven her and says that Raikama's pearl must be returned to him. Shiori mentions her doubts about Raikama being evil, but Seiryu dismisses them on the grounds that if she possesses a corrupted dragon pearl, then she must be corrupted too. Shiori decides she needs to leave and reunite with her brothers, making her exit while the castle is busy with the winter festival. However, as she's about to say goodbye to Magari, she learns that the men of the castle are about to go on a hunt, and she thinks her brothers must be in danger, as they are currently in crane form. She races off into the woods to stop the hunters, much to Hasegi's outrage. Her brothers alight somewhere in the forest, and Shiori goes to find them to make sure they're okay. Only Hasho is injured. Relaying their story through Kiki, they tell Shiori they have tracked down Raikama's origin in the Tambu Isles and found out that her real name is Vanna. It translates as golden. Shiori tries to discuss with her brothers her doubts about Raikama's intentions actually being evil, but like Seiryu, they dismiss it. The brothers see how close Shiori has grown to Takan and comment on it. Takan says he is called off the hunt, but he comes with grave news. Lord Yuji has invaded Alandi, killed the Kagan, and seized his sorcerer, the wolf, and made him serve him. Yuji has assembled an army, is now attacking the Empire, and is en route to Gindara. Takan must heed the call of the Emperor and serve the Empire. He intends to leave tonight. That night, Shiori is also preparing to leave during the winter festival. As she is leaving, she bumps into Zyrina, who comments on the fact that her nice clothes are clashing with her ugly satchel. She insists Shiori switch bags with her and convinces her to try it on. Zyrina then distracts Shiori with talk of Takan's romantic interest in her, and then gives her back her satchel. At the winter festival, Magari and Takan perform for the crowd, and Shiori realizes what Takan meant about how Iroh is the most beautiful place in the world. Shiori decides now is the time to leave, and she goes to say goodbye to Magari and Takan. And just as they might be about to kiss, Shiori thinks about how her cursed life will only bring more sorrow into his world, and so she runs off into the night. However, before she can get too far, Kiki shouts for her. The gold dye on her wing from earlier has turned black, which can only mean that the gold dye concealed the 4 breaths, which means Zyrina is the assassin. Shiori rushes to find help and spots the sentinel. It's Hasegi. He says he will ride her back to the castle. They spot a light on Inshori's room, which Hasigi assures her is Takan waiting for her. They rush up there, but there is no one present. Reaching for her dagger in her bag, Shiori realizes that her satchel was switched for Zarina's silk purse. She's been tricked. Zarina and Hasigi burst in with Lady Bushan and accuse Shiori of being behind everything. Zarina is carrying the satchel and opens it to reveal shadowy wolves that emerge forth. They use this as evidence that Shiori is a sorcerer she is thrown in prison. Zarina visits her in prison, tells Shiori that she is a servant of the sorcerer the wolf, that she knows Shiori's true identity. More than that, she tells Shiori that she is Kiata's bloodsake, the one outlet of wild magic in the whole kingdom. Zarina wants her dead because, as she is a priestess of the Holy Mountain, she must stop anyone from using Shiori's blood to release the demons within the Holy Mountain. Zarina also reveals that the sash Raikama had been so fascinated with back at the palace had been poisoned with 4 breaths by Zarina. The plan had been to put Shiori into a deep slumber and kidnap her. So it turned out Raikama had actually been trying to protect Shiori. By putting the walnut bowl on her head, she'd been trying to hide her magic so the wolf and his minions could not find her. Enraged by Zarina's treachery, Shiori lunges for her from within the prison cell. She can't reach her, but her wet clothes splash water on Zarina's face. This breaks the glamour on Zarina's appearance, revealing her to be Shiori's maid from the palace, Guiya. Shiori is then taken to be burned at the stake. Her brothers fly in to rescue her, and a fight ensues between them and the sentinels under Hasigi's command. Shiori is protected from the flames by the magic of the Dragon Pearl, but Guiya uses the stolen Starstroke net to extract it from Shiori. Takan arrives to rescue her, but does not see Guiya, aiming an arrow for his heart. Desperate to warn him, Shiori shouts his name, and the walnut bowl on her head shatters, and she is engulfed in flames. Shiori awakens amidst ash to find that she has survived. Kiki tells her that her brothers are alive, but remain as cranes, so only Shiori's part of the curse is broken. Takan is alive too. He banishes Hasigi, and then Shiori and Takan set off in pursuit of Guiya. They stop to rest in the chase, and Takan says that he's perhaps always suspected he knew she was Shiori. They share another moment, but is interrupted by injured Guiya, who is promptly shot full of arrows by Lord Yuji's men, who have captured Shiori's brother and put them in cages. The sorcerer, the wolf, emerges as smoke from a necklace around Yuji's neck. The wolf sieges the satchel, gaining possession of the Starstroke net. He tells Shiori that he can now use magic within Kiata because he took Seryu's pearl fragment from Guiya. The wolf betrays Lord Yuji and kills him, breaking his oath and condemning the wolf to be transformed to a demon and dragged off to Holy Mountain. However, the wolf intends to deny his fate by fusing the dragon pearl into his amulet. Takan and Shiori rush to stop him, and Takan fires an arrow which somehow knocks the pearl out of his grasp. As a last desperate act, the wolf drags Shiori with him as he flies off to Holy Mountain. Shiori leaves the pearl with Takan just before she goes. While flying towards Holy Mountain, Shiori and Wolf see a glow beneath. It is Raikama's pearl, and she is traveling towards the Holy Mountain. Wolf intends to use Shiori's blood to free the demons, and then the Starstroke net to take Raikama's pearl. They fight in mid-air, and Shiori retrieves the net. Paper birds sent by Raikama come to her aid just before Shiori plunges inside the mountain. Once inside, Shiori is trapped in an illusion built out of her own memories, but the paper birds sent by Raikama carry a thread which Shiori follows to help her find her way out. She is so close to escape when she finds her way blocked by the wolf, who has assumed his full demon form. He strikes for Shiori, but she dodges and runs for a fissure in the rock, which Raikama is channeling all of her power to open a way for Shiori. Raikama is pulling Shiori out, but the wolf grabs Shiori's ankle. Shiori summons great magic to cause a huge landslide within the mountain, crushing the demons. It forces the wolf to let go before he is crushed, but not before he leaves with a drop of Shiori's blood on his claws. Free from the mountain, Shiori is reunited with Raikama, who is severely weakened from her efforts. Raikama apologizes for everything she did and insists she did all she could to protect Shiori and her brothers. Shiori removes Raikama's pearl at Raikama's insistence, and Raikama transforms back into her true self. She is cursed with the appearance of a snake. Raikama tells Shiori that Vanna was her sister's name and the pearl was her sister's, who was born with it inside her. Raikama makes one final request, that Shiori return the pearl to the Dragon King, who would lead Shiori to its true owner. We jump forward in time a short while. Shiori says goodbye to everyone. Takan gifts her his sketchbook from when they first met, and then Shiori travels under the sea to meet the Dragon King. The final scene is of the wolf smearing Shiori's blood against the wall of the mountain and cracks starting to appear. So that's it. I mean, one of the things that kind of irked me was, and this is a trope I think that can be used quite clumsily, is the big bad arrives, and then to establish that there's an even bigger bad, the big bad immediately gets killed. Because, of course, you've got Guiya, who's been this antagonistic presence. And then she's like, oh, I'm all wounded. And then she's shot full of arrows. And Lord Yuji just goes, that's right, it was me, and I'm taking over control. And then the wolf goes, actually, I'm taking over control.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, like it's a real clumsy shorthand for showing the hierarchy of evil. Like we haven't seen the wolf or Lord Yuji for the entire book. They turn up and this is how we're supposed to think that they're the bad guys and that they're powerful. What did you think about that moment?
Yeah, I think my main feeling about it was that the wolf in general was slightly underdeveloped
Mm.
as a character, and I think we've kind of had this throughout with, you know, the Dragon King previously and the way that Shiori's magic happens and stuff. There's a little bit of a lack of description. Guia really, I think, was the only one that through the character of Zyrina had been developed into this
Mm.
antagonist that we were like, okay, we know we don't like her and we know why we don't like her and all of that stuff.
I think there's a poor editorial choice here because if you'd finished this book with Raikama has passed away, you've had that emotional moment. The army, whether they're asleep or not, I don't really care. Maybe it doesn't really make much sense for right now. I feel like that's going to be used in the third book, which, could wait. But really, you could have Shiori finishing with the pearl, and that's it. Being like, I've got this pearl. I don't really know what it means, but who knows? It could be a source of greater power, and I can help the kingdom. End. Second book begins. You have the call to adventure, which is the pearl is disintegrating. The Dragon King wants it back. Like, have that at the start of the second book. Like, why have this kind of like what is effectively the opening act of the second book right at the end when she dives into the water? I don't need that. Close it off. Finish your story. You know?
It's to draw you back in, Sam. You gotta just accept that that she's gonna try. But I agree in terms of I think what we're saying is actually if you strip back some of the sort of over complexity that came in, especially in that last third, you can give a lot more detail in the description of how that climax happens, because I think my overall very simple analysis of it, and helpfully I guess we did the book in 3 equal parts, is the first third was probably a little bit too fast and needed a little bit more description. The second third was the strongest part because it slowed down and gave sort of space to development and
100%
understanding people's motivations. And then the third part was too fast again, and I left kind of thinking, what?
I completely agree with you about that middle point. Like when you have the growing relationship between Shiori and Takan, the kind of goings on in the court, Magari is this kind of additional kind of like prompting character towards their relationship. All of it was really lovely. Give that more breathing room.
Yeah.
Like Takan is completely sidelined towards the end because they just have to wrap up and set up all the next little bits.
Did you think the Bloodsake thing sort of came a little bit out of nowhere as well as a concept?
Yeah.
It explained some of the stuff that had happened previously, but I thought, had it been mentioned, the idea that there is one person whose blood can unlock the mountain?
I don't think there had been. I think, like, because they refer to Shiori early in the book as this sorcerer. There's no kind of intimation that, oh, this must mean that you are the Bloodsake. Like, I don't think I ever heard that word prior to this last bit of the book.
No.
And it would have been so good if, like, she'd done some research or someone makes mention of it or anything like that, where, like, she's like, oh, well, I can't be that. You know, because and I don't know if it's because if we realize that's who she is, then we can unravel what Raikama's motivations are. You know, and by having to obscure it early on in the book, it makes it easier for us to go, why is Raikama doing all of this stuff? Because we don't know that she's doing it to protect her from the people who would want to get hold of Shiori's blood. So maybe that's why she purposefully leaves out and has no mention of it. But the flaw of that is what we have here, is that we get to the third part of the book and it's just like, and there's a thing called a Bloodsake, and you're it. And this is why people are doing all this stuff, rather than, you know, what if Fort Iroh had a library? and she's just like, I wonder if there's a way I can use my magic without talking. Let
Mm.
me go and have a read. And she starts reading about the use of magic. And, maybe we've just read too many books with libraries in recently, but it seems like a powerful resource to have where you could just find out about some of this, because
Yeah.
just we, again, the threads, weave something in there. That means that we have some establishment here, because it just came in out of nowhere. And as much as it was supposed to be this revelation, I just don't think it worked.
Yeah. We are potentially sort of really bagging on this, and we'll come round to things that we did like about it. I do have a couple of other things that I think are worth digging into. Going all the way back to reading the blurb in the episode before last, there was an insinuation. So there's multiple levels to this. One is that there is a kind of grand plot that spans the kingdom of Kiata. And the other insinuation is that Shiori's kind of trying to unpick it. I'm not 100% sure that I'm on board with either of those two things being a part of this story. Raikama's not had anything to do with this plot, which I guess is the thing that we're leaning on from the very beginning, or at least from when the curse comes into place, is that Raikama is a part of this big plot. The invasion of Alandi seems somewhat disconnected from anything else that's actually going on, and just seems to be a sort of complicating factor. Don't get me wrong, it may kind of serve the purpose of other elements of the story, but the involvement of the wolf and how that all ends up playing out doesn't say to me this is all a kind of grand scheme and this is how we intended it all to play out, because they didn't actually know that Shiori was there in Fort Iroh until very close to the end. And then my feeling is that Shiori spent the whole of the book trying to figure out how to break the curse, which had nothing to do with any grand plot that may or may not have been going on elsewhere. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to raise this as a problem. So initially, the first thing from what you said is this like an instance of a very weak blurb on the back of a book? Because we picked up on this in the first one because it offers potential spoilers, and then when you're talking about this grand conspiracy, it can either go two different ways of interpretation, and neither of them particularly help the blurb. One of them, as you say, is it to do with Raikama, in which case it's intentionally misleading us, because it's kind of being like, oh, we want you to think that Raikama's part of this conspiracy, when really they could have just pitched it at another angle of like just cursed by her stepmother following revelations about her own past, because really Raikama's whole thing is she's scared of losing what she's gained because she had nothing. And I think I will come on to that as one of the positives about Raikama's characterization that I really liked. But it just means that if that's what they're talking about, a grand conspiracy, it isn't one, and they're intentionally lying to us on the blurb, which you don't need to do. You just don't need to mention it, right?
No, and I think you're right. It could have just been cursed by stepmother to complicate matters. There's an invasion of Kiata and blah. It doesn't have to be something that's like insinuated.
And then, if it is to do with Lord Yuji and, Alandi and all this kind of stuff, you're right, because that's not really in this book. It's very much in the background. You're potentially seeing it happening in the future books, which again is like when you've got an author who has potentially written or at least sketched out in decent detail the 3 books that she wants to have in her trilogy, it can mean that the people who are writing the stuff know too much and it is no longer relevant. Maybe there was some major re-editing and this blurb isn't reflective of what actually happens in this book. The other one it could potentially be is the murder, who's got the 4 breaths at Fort Iroh, which is a bit more of a mystery, but it's such a minor thing that really is more to do with Cyrina's machinations, and it's not the central theme. It's not the central plot of the book. So whichever one it applies to, I don't think it's really worth putting on the blurb, because it's not what this book is about. you know?
And I guess we should mention that it's probably not Elizabeth Lim that's written that blurb.
No, of course, no.
Almost certainly not. I'm not sure. It's usually like publishers or whoever that do that. Maybe they only read half of it. I think if you read half of the book, you might sort of put that together.
You got some kind of like put some poor little dog's body at the publisher being like, okay, what's this about? Okay, it's conspiracy stuff that thought someone's dying. Okay, I got this. You know, yeah, it could be that they just haven't. But I've never really come across a blurb where I've been so annoyed at it.
Yeah.
You know, because you think it's just a summary. Usually it should be a summary of the opening, let's say, quarter of the book, and then projecting out of like, and then more things will happen. Whereas this one kind of covers more than it should, and it's just misleading. and so that it does leave me quite frustrated. And you're right to have picked it up. But one of the things I want to touch upon, which is leading into a positive thing, is Raikama and her characterization. I loved her as a character. Like, you know, how we'd kind of had a guess that she wasn't going to be all evil, and they kind of like in this final third of the book, they really kind of like cast that doubt in there because Shuri keeps going to people, do you think Raikama's actually bad? Do you think Raikama's actually bad? And, you know, everyone's like, yeah, of course she is. She's a woman. She's an evil stepmother. That's the standard model of evil person. And but I like that her motivations all kind of made sense to me. You know, granted, a lot of them are delivered right at the end. She's like, actually, my name is this. I'm a snake person. I'm kind of cursed. I don't really want to go into it. Anyway, goodbye. Blah. You know, and that's it. She dies. But I felt genuinely touched when you find out that, you know, she was willing to warp the memories that Shiori had of connecting with her in order just to alleviate the grief of losing her mother. What a beautiful thing to have done.
Yeah, and there was a lot of, as we find out in that kind of very ending section, there was a lot of kind of sacrifice that she made. That was kind of the theme of it, was that even the curse itself was a sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, she loved Shiori, she loves her brothers. The only way to keep them safe was to not have them near her anymore. I think she's probably the strongest part of the book. I wonder whether the reveal of it, like you were just saying, kind of where Shiori's sort of doing this whole like, guys, I wonder whether actually Raikama's not as bad as we all thought, and the brothers are like, look at us.
Yeah, we're bloody birds now, all right?
Literally a crane.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? But I wonder whether you could have had that reveal be a little bit more dramatic as part of that kind of ending sequence, maybe in the mountain. But I like in general, like, you know, very, very touching. Like, it was a very emotional sort of end where she dies, and that whole story is you know, very, very moving.
I just feel like her death would have meant more if it wasn't against the wolf. If it was like, you know, Guiyar gets hold of the pearl and starts using dark magics, you know, like, just have that as being the final thing that Raikama has to kind of like, you know, and when the pearl comes out, it weakens her completely or something like that. Like,
well, yeah, just make, like, tie in the sacrifice thing all the way to the end. Have her like sacrifice herself in a moment where Shiori's almost certain to die. Like, you know, that's maybe where I would have gone with it. But yeah, it was a kind of nice moment. I wasn't 100% sure how she knew to be running towards the mountain at that particular moment in time.
Magic. It's magic.
One word explanation. Easy. Fantasy books, you just use the word magic as a...
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I don't know. Like, Raikama didn't have any kind of connection that we know of, but she did seem to have a bit of omniscience about it, because, you know, whenever Shiori was about to go, maybe I will say a word, and Raikama was like, quick, send a snake.
Yeah,
don't say the word. Don't be a stupid bitch.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh yeah, right, no talking.
Yeah.
You know, so there was an element of her power. But again, like, the explanation for why Raikama did what she did, like, you know, bowl on head, boys to cranes, she was like, well, I didn't want them to be able to tell anybody. I didn't want to, be exposed. And this was how the pearl chose the spells, chose the form of the spell. And it's like, okay, so to what degree of control do you have over this magic? Because throughout the book, it seemed like you were all powerful. You had these amazing, like very precise skills to be like, okay, let's make sure that if she tries to do it, 6 birds will fall out from the sky as a warning. Let's make sure that I'm constantly there to make sure she's not talking. There's just so many things where it's like, oh, she's a master of these powers. And at the end, she's like, it was a real bodge job, if I'm honest. I didn't have much control over it. I was just blagging it and just, they turned to cranes. None of that was really planned anyway. Bye-bye. And it's just, I was like, okay, so how powerful is she? Because she also just channeled into a mountain. Like, how do we know that she wasn't the one causing the landslide? The fact that she was powerful wild magics. Like, how much does it drain her whenever she used magic? Because right now it's almost killed her. How is that what the Dragon Pearl does? What are the mechanics here? I don't really know.
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting, because I think my initial reaction was like, oh, okay, well that's fine, that makes sense then. But now that you mention it, yeah, I think it's so. There's a moment after that, because obviously we see the whole story from Shiori's perspective, where obviously she kind of has this unconscious period after the curse has been put on her, and then she wakes up and then the far north of the island. And we talked a bit before about kind of Raikama immediately afterwards being like, right, what have I got to do to get my ducks in a row? Do you think actually that moment was like, oh man, not again?
Yeah.
like I just meant to, I just meant to scare her a little bit, and now
I just wanted her to forget again. I mean, maybe it was probably that the Dragon Pearl was sick of wiping people's memories over and over again.
Yeah.
It was like, it's just something big. And I can't remember, does it explain how she ends up on the island? Does Raikama / Chunari get someone to take her? Is part of the spell like bowl goes on head, you go to an island?
I think I'm just accepting that she's got enough magical power to say you're going to the furthest part of Kyoto away from here, and that's kind of part of the curse, is that you're going to be super isolated from here.
I feel like the core of this book is the relationship between her and Takan as well, and I really like that as a relationship. I think Takan was a great romantic interest.
Yeah, I was going to say our first sort of positive point of Raikama took a slightly negative turn there.
Yes,
but what I liked, and now that you've come on to Takan, is the fact that whilst he was a potential fairy tale Prince Charming knight in shining armor, he was never allowed to sort of just take over and save the day.
Yeah.
Sort of she maintained that kind of ability to say, no, you're staying here, I'm protecting you, I need to do this, and it didn't kind of fall into the Prince Charming saves the day, breaks the curse, and so I enjoy, but on top of that, we had all the nice kind of romantic development stuff.
Yeah.
Still trying to figure out the mechanics of potentially kissing with a bowl covering most of your face, but
just gonna get down underneath the, like, because actually also, like, in terms of the mechanics of the bowl, like, how far out did you see it coming from her head?
Yeah.
Like, because was it one that goes just tucks in real close over like that, or was it one that was kind of like a more standard bowl, but so it's like flared out like a really big wide brimmed hat?
Yeah, so I saw it as probably a bit more flared out.
Yeah,
which gave significant logistical difficulties for snogging.
And it must have been so confusing for people to just be like, well, surely I could just because the bowl's not that wide. How can I not see any of her face under this rim that flares out so much? I think, like, the mechanics of kissing Shiori aside, I think Takan really worked for me as a romantic interest, because, like you say, it's not just the fact that he gave her own space and it wasn't like, I'm a Prince Charming, but his nice traits were also a bit flawed as well, which made him seem really rounded. The fact that, he really was crushing on her hard when they first met all those years ago, but he was just sending these letters, and he was just like, just really wanted to be the nice guy, and it didn't work out for him because he just was getting it all wrong. I kind of get why you did it, because your character would actually really do that. Like, it felt believable. It wasn't an arbitrary thing where it's like, oh, I wish I could talk to you. It was like he thought this was the nice thing to do. He was trying to win her over, and she was just having none of it. But he persisted. And I think there was this real nice thread throughout the whole book where his attention to detail was a part of who he was. Like, he found that slipper and was like, this is an important detail. He was trying to figure out where the four breaths was coming from. And when that related to his relationship with Shuri, he was like, oh, that little dimple when you smile. And when she finally gets the bowl off, and he's like, oh, I was suspecting everything ever since the Sparrow Inn when I saw you cooking, and the way you were dancing and tapping your feet was just like I saw Shiori at the summer festival. It's like, this guy gets details, and he's really obsessed with, like, because he likes Shiori, he pays attention. And so without telling us, like, oh, he's really infatuated and loves paying attention to all the details, and he doesn't have to, he just the little instances throughout where you get that as a built-up character trait for him.
Yeah. I agree. Another bit that I don't like being kind of too negative, but the whole escaping the mountain just felt so quick and so lacking in jeopardy. Did you feel the same about that? It was just like, hold on to this thread and just follow it down. She's like, okay. And then about 5 minutes later, she's out of the mountain. Yeah. And obviously there's the thing with the wolf as she tries to get out. But I thought there was an opportunity there for it to be this. I think the thread, going back to what we talked about in the last episode, I get that it's this book-long theme. But I think it made it too easy, and I think it needed to be something where, because they obviously they had these powers, and they were appearing and drawing her into kind of familiar situations and trying to get her to come within reach so that they could grab her, whatever. There's an opportunity there. It's a cool potential mechanism for showing us what demons are like.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get a sense of what demons were like from that whole interaction,
because we had bits throughout the book where they said enchanters can turn into demons, there are demons all in the mountain, and it was only really by my second read through where I was just piecing together going, okay, so they're pulled to the mountain, right, when they're released, and they're all stored in there, and they are the magic, the demons and the magic is all intertwined, everything's stored in there, because it's almost like any bit of magic that appears in Kyoto is pulled in. Cool, got that. But when she's inside it, it's like, okay, so the demons are pretending to be memories from her past. They're in the walls. Because like they're not swarming all over her. Are they walking? Is it like mountain halls? Is it the mountain itself is completely solid and they're in this almost trans-dimensional space within the rock? Because that's why, like, even the mechanic of when the wolf is holding Shiori's ankle and Roikama's trying to pull her out, I was thinking, are they passing through solid rock? Have they opened a tunnel that's like just channeling through like meters and meters of rock? Like, is it kind of like the whole mountain is hollow? I don't get it. I don't know what it is.
The impression I got was that they're all kind of chained in place, so they can't reach, the demons can't reach any further than arm's length, so they needed Shiori to come to within reach so that they could grab her, and then obviously blood, etc.
And that's why they were doing the illusions.
But the point you make about the sort of thickness of the walls of the mountain, actually Shiori escapes via some pretty kind of convenient just hole.
I think it's described as a fissure, but like whether it's kind of like just a really narrow crack and like she has to crawl through it, it doesn't really make it, like she almost seems to fly through the mountain, because lost in these illusions, which also are not given enough time to breathe. Like, she's reflecting on her being a selfish child and, bad to her siblings. Her siblings are suddenly mocking her. And then she turns up and the wolf is on the throne almost representing her father. But there's been so little in terms of like paternal issues or anything like that, because her dad's such a non-entity in this book. Like the fact that the wolf is sitting there representing the emperor, and it's not like a corruption of her father. it's just, oh, I want to be emperor. It's like we didn't. That's the wrong imagery to choose for this moment, because that's really where this story's been building up. Like, it's about her relationship with her stepmother and her mother. It's about her relationship with her brothers. Have that be the final denouement of these illusions,
Yeah.
of what he represents. And also the thread's like just going over his lap, and he's like, come get the thread. And then he's almost like, I've got this plan, and my plan is to run at you. And then she just ducks and just legs it.
Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff there where I just thought, and I think it goes back to what you were saying, the climax of the book should have been the breaking of the curse and, maybe some kind of follow-on emotional explanation stuff with Raikama.
Yeah.
All of that. If you're going to do this second climax thing, then give us what the demons are actually like.
Yeah.
Make it a genuine jeopardy, and you make the book longer. Like, if that's what it takes, make the book longer, and we need to spend more time in that mountain if that's going to be a big thing.
You get a feeling that, like, when they're writing these books, there's a certain they think they've got a formula where they say, like, 300 to 450, 500 max. That's as long as these books should be. If you're pumping out a trilogy, don't make each of them too long, because we need to be able to, we want to cut that story down into people can read these over a week on holiday. We don't want to be a massive tome that people can't hold up. All that, because like all those thoughts come into it. But like, make the wolf the boss of Guia. And at the end, you're like, oh, he's mad now. He's coming for you. You've killed one of his best disciples. He'll be back in a future book. Like, he just let him stew and become this overarching evil presence. Like, leave this to the later book. I don't know if she was under extreme pressure to be like, no, we need more for the future books. More sizzle for the next one. We want people to buy it. Don't just write a good book and make people want to experience the world a bit more because they like the characters and the setting. No. You actually have to leave them hungry by giving them unfulfilling endings. It's like, come on.
Oh, man. Sam's triggered. Yeah, you don't need to have a sales pitch at the end of a book to if it's a good piece of work. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but yes, I've ended up being this is a whole Foxglove King situation again, where I've ended up being far too negative. The core of this book, the Shiori is a princess. She has a curse put on her. She goes off to this Fort Iroh, and she falls in love with Takan, and then there's a threat, and she almost dies, and she breaks the curse. Loved it. I literally, like, that 80% of the book, loved it. Really loved, like, Fort Iroh, beautiful setting. I was picturing some kind of like hilltop forest, like in Hokkaido, Japan, or something like that. Big rolling hills.
Yeah.
When she has that moment in the Winter Festival where she says, I realize why this was the most beautiful place in the world. I was like, I'm picturing it. Like, that Winter Festival sounds beautiful, and like you just this really emotional thing. Like, I could have happily had a bit more story in Fort Iroh. I know I in the last episode I had said, oh, I'm looking forward to getting back to Gindara, it all kicking off when they get back there. But to be honest, I was like, no, it made sense to set everything here. This was a story not about Gindara. This was a story about Iroh and that whole region.
Yeah. So we've got our key questions. First one of which is, would you like to live in this world that Elizabeth Lim has created for us?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where, not that grotty old island up in the north, like wherever that place was, but Fort Iroh sounds beautiful. And because it's one of those stories that focuses entirely on the elites, and they kind of want to make all of them seem like the fact that they are feudal lords who oppress the masses, it has to be one of those fantasy worlds where it's like, of course I'm a benevolent ruler and all my peasants love me and their work isn't that hard. They have festivals, they just do basic menial tasks, and the rest of the time their life is quite good. They're not all famine ridden and pestilent. No, they have nice peasanty lives that I don't really trouble myself with. And so even if I was a peasant around Fort Iroh, it sounds like I'm spending most of my time just like fishing, just wandering around snowy fields. It sounds like a nice life. Just looking forward to the next festival.
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I was like, if you were just an ordinary person in this world, there's not like a huge amount of danger and jeopardy. It's kind of like anywhere else. You know, there's people that do better and people that do worse, and you know, you just hope that if you're being transported into a new world, that you're on the better off end of it. Whether in the next book we get a world that is absolutely plagued by demons that have escaped from a mountain, that could be something that you might just have in the back of your mind, like, oh, there's that mountain over there that in the wrong circumstances we could have a pretty significant problem.
Yeah, like the world that it's entering into is not as nice as the world that we're leaving. You know, yeah, like this peaceful empire ruled over by a benevolent emperor and his sons, who are all going to grow up to be really good rulers. Sounds lovely.
So the other question is, would you recommend this book? Or what would you do with it? You know, what's the kind of final word?
I think I'd want to read the next book and then decide if it's worth recommending, because it, like, the story in here is really good. It's just how it ties onto the next book. If that fulfills the promise, I'd be like, here's the first two books, and trust me, you have to read them both as one because otherwise it doesn't work. Then I think that's what I'd do. But on its own, in isolation, no.
Yeah. Literally the exact same analysis. I think as it stands, I couldn't recommend it to a friend or even people that are kind of into the fantasy genre. But again, like it's very obviously written as a part of a larger story. And I think it would be interesting to see, because obviously this story is very much based on an existing fairy tale. We've now kind of reached the end of that fairy tale story. Does that make it better, worse going forward? I don't know.
The core of it for me is I really like Shiori. I really want to know more about where her magic's going, because it's exploding. Like, you know, she's suddenly discovered all this power and she took it in her stride really well. The fact that she's now so powerful. I want to know more about where that's going. So that's the thing that really intrigues me. So it's a shame that I feel like so much of the around it has stopped me from wanting to recommend it further.
Yeah. So I guess we have a decision to make at some point whether we return to the next book. In the meantime, you can give us your opinions. If you've read along, if you've listened along to our discussion, you can let us know whether you think we should come back to the next book, and also any other thoughts you've had on Elizabeth Lim's Six Crimson Cranes. You can do that by getting in touch on social media, on a variety of platforms: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Escapists Anonymous Pod. And in the next episode, we're starting a brand new book, which is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. And we will be reading from the prologue through to the end of chapter 12. So, join us on the Escapists Anonymous podcast for the next episode. And all that's left to say is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.